Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 450 chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it has no compression. Okay, so one of the lessons you can take from this video is that interpreting people's complaints can be interesting sometimes. If they don't understand how these things work, they bring them in for someone to fix them. Well, they also may not know all the terminology or how to explain what they're feeling or what their complaint is. So this customer said it has no compression. We're looking in the fuel tank. I don't know what this brown oil that he used here would be. It doesn't look like steel oil. It doesn't look like Echo oil or Husky oil. I don't know. I mean, way back in the day, we used to just mix engine oil, right? So, the fuel smelled alright. It has some kind of oil in it. I'm going to look in the cylinder and see what we got going on there, because if it truly doesn't have any compression, then maybe that decompression button is stuck in, or maybe I'm going to find the inside of the cylinder to be scored, and maybe the piston ring is stuck in the groove or something like that, right? Well, the cylinder looks good. So I'm not really sure the decompression button's working the way it's supposed to. At least it's not stuck open. So at this point I decide I'm going to backtrack a little bit, put his fuel back in it, and start it up and see what it does. I mean, at this point, I haven't even pulled on the cord yet to see what it feels like. So we'll give it a try and see what it does. Seems to prime up decent. No problems there. That's not so great, is it? So you could see there that I grabbed the choke lever and tried to richen it up a little bit just to show that it does not appear that it's just starving for fuel. So if you thought that this was a carburetor problem, you were wrong. This is an ignition problem. It's not an uncommon one. And I believe it has something to do with the timing circuit inside the module. Let's try this again. So that spark tester, it was pretty erratic. I don't know if that in itself says anything, but we could certainly hear that it wasn't running right and it was missing. And when we pulled the throttle, it would just bog. So we're going to put a different ignition module on here and see if that's going to fix it. I'm just pointing out here that this module has been installed on a saw before, and that's because I keep one back by the bench. So we're going to pull the side cover off. 4 screws holding the starter on. And we're going to access that module. It's pretty dirty underneath here. Yeah. We're going to need to clean this up. Yeah, it looks better. We can work on that. No more schmutz. So here I'm going to pull the old ignition coil off, but I want to point out that that really should not be your next step when it comes to replacing ignition modules. Now the problem that we're seeing here isn't usually associated with a bad ground of the ignition module, but it should be part of your routine to test the ground before just willy-nilly replacing them. So the first thing we do is check our meter leads and see if they zero out on the ohm scale. And then we test between the lamination of the coil and the engine ground, somewhere on the cylinder. 0.2 ohms or less is a very good connection. That's what we want. If you got anything higher than that, then maybe the next step should be to remove the coil and clean the mounting point between the cylinder or engine block and the laminations of the coil. You'll find every once in a while that that's all the problem is, and you don't actually need a new coil, you just needed to clean up the ground. Electricity needs a path to follow, and it's got to follow out the high tension lead and back through the ground to the coil. So we're going to mount this one in here. There is a ground wire on one of the screws, and that runs to the kill switch. And the other wire from the kill switch runs back up to the spade terminal on the coil. So when you hit the kill switch, it's just shorting out that spade terminal. Here I'm inserting the gauge that I use to test the air gap between the magnets of the flywheel and the ignition coil. And the gauge is 0.3 millimeters thick. We'll get it snugged down. Got our kill wire on there. Make sure to remove the gauge. They make a funny noise when they're tinkling around in there, around the flywheel. At least that's what I've heard. Let's get the starter back on here. Then we're going to try and fire this thing up. And if it does start and run smooth, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 450 chainsaw that needed an ignition module. Thanks for watching. Later.